Hello again, this one's a little bit different. I'm not sure if I'm going to put it in the description. I figured as I'm technically meant to be a tour guide, we'll do some history stuff, maybe. I doubt at the moment what the plan is, but this is mostly a way of me keeping my mind fresh in case I am going back to the job, because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't think I'm going to do the whole route that the bus covers in terms of what you're going to see here, so to speak. But the idea really is to, as I say, that, and also, I don't know, past afternoon. I don't think it's going to be a terribly long video. Hopefully, I've not done it this way before, in the sense that I'm going to try and do a voice clip and apply it and stuff. The views expressed, so to speak, on my own. And I'm not representing any company, but needless to say, please try and remain seated when the bus is in motion for your own safety and my sanity, and we'll try and take you around London as able as you can, and I'll be your tour guide and your driver is me as well. Aren't you lucky? Maybe, we'll see. So as the bishop said to the actress, here goes nothing. The remainder of the old Anglo-Saxon for old settlement, is devoted really to the roles of academia and diplomacy. On your left is the London School of Economics, the second top university in London, where the likes of John F. Kennedy, Sir Mick Jagger and Sir David Attenborough were once educated, and indeed, apparently, Miss Monica Lewinsky back in the day. For some reason, students like to turn up on a weekend. I can't imagine why, because when I was at uni, that was frowned upon. Now, as we come off the Old Rich, we're going to gradually work our way to the city limits. And just ahead of you, catching the brilliant sunshine, is St. Clement Danes Church. And indeed, this church is a Christopher Wren church, or at least it was. The church was originally opened in the 9th century for Danish invaders to marry their English brides at that, and I don't think they had a say in the matter. And then Christopher Wren rebuilt it in the 17th century, but not because of the Great Fire of London. However, on the very last night of the Blitz, the 11th of May 1941, St. Clement's was gutted by enemy action and took until 1968 to reopen, when it was done so by Her Majesty the Queen. It is nowadays the official church of the Royal Air Force in London, and this year they've got a particular ceremony to do, like they do every September, and it's the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. And on the Sunday closest to the 15th, which is Battle of Britain Day, or indeed if it falls on that, they always have a ceremony to remember the few. As you see as you come on past it, there is gouges down towards the back of the church and up towards the roof, and that is enemy action. And what survived the Blitz on that last night, you can just see there a tiny little statue of Samuel Johnson. If a man tired of London, he tired of life, said Samuel Johnson. And the statue survived the Blitz, but not the pigeons. And indeed, Samuel Johnson used to worship in the church, but also put together the Oxford English Dictionary. Now that's taken us alongside his Gothic majesty upon your left. That will be the Royal Courts of Justice. And the Royal Courts opened in 1868 by Queen Victoria, one of the first public engagements she had 7 years after the death of her beloved Albert. And as you can see, it's got a tremendous archway, probably the most photographed and filmed entrance in all of London, if not the country. Great many court cases happen here, too many to report on, and the newspapers don't report everything that happens here. And the likes of Paul McCartney and Heather Mills' divorce case tend to attract the attention. But as you'll see, it's closed on a weekend. Monday to Friday, it's where it's all happening. And there's public galleries that let you check out the British legal system in operation. And indeed, you're now in the heartland of the law community in London, some of which, the Inns of Court, have been in London for over 1,000 years. Now, as you can see, we're coming up towards and then alongside on your right, this beautiful column in the middle of the road, which sort of is the demarcation point between the city of Westminster, where we are, and the city of London that we've just passed into. So you always see these griffins, they're meant to be called, anywhere in a particular line of sight around London. Now, presently, you are in a very different part of town that is not readily apparent to the naked eye, so to speak. You're now in the city, as I say, the square mile or the golden mile, but this is London. The Romans landed in 43 AD and left in 463 AD. In that time, London blossomed from the banks of the River Thames into a reasonably large town with a few thousand people living within it, and fortified by walls. The London Wall is long since gone. It was updated all the way through to the 17th century, when it eventually came down, and much of the old London Wall that you will see up by Tower London was done in the medieval period, almost 1,000 years after the Romans landed. So you're now within a place that has its own square, its own police force, its own Lord Mayor for 900 years almost, and various laws and bylaws that are over 1,000 years old. So that hop and a skip takes you out onto Fleet Street. Now, as you see, Fleet Street is rather quiet on a weekend, and that's the trouble with the City of London nowadays, is that even though London began here all that time ago, and this was the capital, and there was countryside beyond it, there's no one here really at a weekend, unfortunately. Most of the shops are closed, as you'll see along the way. But if you come here Monday to Friday, there's a great many people at this time of day, midday 1 o'clock, latest 2 o'clock, queuing out the doors of coffee shops and the like. Fleet Street was home of the newspapers from 1702 to 1986, and Rupert Murdoch started the exodus in 85 when he wanted larger office space, more modern office space, and so he yanked his 3 newspapers out just past the city limits to a place called Wapping, and everyone else followed suit, and they're all gone by 86. You don't get many of their homes left after the journos moved out. The newspapers' homes were essentially destroyed and rebuilt, so much of the city is vastly changed even in the past 30 years. So you initially come past, before we reach Ludgate Circus, the grey mass really of the old Daily Telegraph building, and then just past that, this black fronted building is what we call Art Deco. It's the old Daily Express building, which opened in 1932. Now, before we reach Ludgate Circus, as you've seen, you may know a few pubs along the way. There's a dozen or so on and off the street. Most of these were built after the Great Fire of London. After the fire of 1666, churches and pubs were the priorities given in terms of reconstruction. Essentially a tavern did everything in those days. It was a place to sleep for the night, it was a place to get something to eat, somewhere to entertain yourself, somewhere to leave your horse. And now as you see along the way, even though they're closed today, many places to eat, drink and be merry in. So pubs are thin and few between nowadays. But these pubs, some of them anyway, cellars with pieces of buildings from over 700 years ago. So that's taken us up onto Ludgate Circus. And as we wait for the old red light here, just on your right hand, so you'll be able to make out the Old Bell pub before the circus itself. And the Old Bell was built by Christopher Wren for the workers of his beautiful cathedral. And indeed, in the 19th and 20th centuries, was a pub for the Daily Express journos. It's a tight little pub because back in the day, the English were a very short breed. Now, Ludgate Circus sort of sits on the edge of the Roman heart of the city. Just ahead, if you're on the other side of the junction from us, between those two buildings would have been where the London Wall sat and the Ludgate. And there's debate, in some quarters anyway, who or what the gate was named for. Some say it was King Lud, who was buried on this site in 66 BC, and some say it was an Anglo-Saxon version of Floodgate, because the River Fleet ran on the surface ahead of us into the Thames, and it still does, but it's now under Farringdon Street. Essentially, there were about a dozen or so rivers that ran through the streets of the capital, and we're going to come past another one soon, the Walbrook, and the Fleet was used as a rubbish dump, like all these rivers were, and Christopher Wren was tasked with narrowing it, sorting it out, making it look nice, and they were still used as a rubbish dump, including the Fleet prison, which would be down to our left by about 200 metres. So they hid it, and there's a lot more beneath our feet than people realise. So we now head over that, I'm going to head up Ludgate Hill, so we're now in Londinium. Creeping into view is Sir Christopher Wren's magnificent masterpiece, and that's to say St. Paul's Cathedral. Few buildings capture the imagination in London than St. Paul's. It stands 365 feet high, and there are 528 steps to get you to the top of the dome, which was referred to as the Golden Gallery, as it was said to be the closest you could get to touching heaven back in the day. The church took 35 years to build and was started just after the fire. It went through a few monarchs, 3 or 4, and ended in the reign of Queen Anne in 1710. It was a controversial church when it opened because the dome looked Catholic to a city that was incredibly Protestant in those days. Now, St. Paul's represents more than a church. It's a symbol of Britain, what was, what can be, what is more than a religious building in that respect. And Christopher Wren would be somewhat tickled to realise that his great cathedral stands still to this day, intact and untouched. And in a way, we have to thank for that the brave efforts of firefighters in the Blitz, and indeed those based within the dome in both World Wars, known as the Fire Watch. And the Fire Watch was instrumental in the Blitz in saving the dome when a magnesium flare punched through and could have incinerated the whole lot. During the Blitz, a bomb was discovered just before the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral, and it took a few hours to exfiltrate, and then it was carefully driven off to Hackney Marshes, a couple of miles north, and when they detonated it, it left a hole that 4 London buses could have sat in. And so, if it had gone off, it would have brought the whole church down, probably, of at least the front and the dome. But aside from that, great many state funerals have been held here, most famous of which is Winston Churchill's in 1965, given a rare privilege because usually it's got to be members of royalty. And the streets of the capital, along the route from Westminster all the way into St. Paul's, were lined with many people, maybe a couple million, old and young. I mean, there were kids standing there that weren't even born when Churchill was Prime Minister the second time round. And they're all deathly quiet, like it is now. So that's your that's your stop number 14 for St. Paul's Cathedral. Stop number 14 for St. Paul's Cathedral. And so we'll give it a moment for the driver needs to go to the toilet. But St. Paul's deserves, a lot more said about it as we paused here, because it's still here. This church, though, is the 5th church since the year 960 AD. My apologies, 604. I'm thinking of Westminster Abbey. It's been a long day, what can I say? And it was built by the Bishop Mellitus. Now, that's what, well over 2,000 years almost. Almost well over 1,400 years. And it's said today that there must have been something here before Bishop Mellitus warmed up. I mean, there might have been a Roman temple, Anglo-Saxon ritual site or some such. Or why else would Bishop Mellitus set up here? Or maybe it's just a case of the fact that it was on the banks of the Thames as it would have been in those days. The previous St. Paul's, which was destroyed in the Great Fire, was actually taller than the current cathedral. It had a tremendous black spire, crooked by lightning the year before it burned down. And Christopher Wren wanted to slap a dome on it and refurbish it and the like, and he wasn't allowed to, really, because the building was far too weak by that point. The Great Fire comes along and is consuming the building in temperatures, they said, exceeding 1,700 degrees Celsius. The king and others stood on the street just ahead of where we are and watched the old St. Paul's get destroyed in the Great Fire. Indeed, the road we've just come up Ludgate Hill ran thick with melting lead down into Ludgate Circus. It was probably a portent in those days. People were a lot more God-fearing than they are now in London. I mean, there used to be 1,000 churches in the square mile. Now there's only about 100. 700 of those were St. Mary's, if you can imagine. So, the destruction of this church in 1666 was sort of like the end of the road in some respects to people. And indeed, the king probably, maybe, now it's to say Charles II, was a bit nervous. He had only just restored the throne 6 years after the end of the Republic. And the idea of him coming back was that he didn't repeat the mistakes of the past, and in the way he had to behave himself. He wasn't. I mean, the man was known as the Merry Monarch, and he had a lot of parties with people that weren't his wife, shall we put it mildly. So, the destruction of St. Paul's was what it was, the end of the world. But, needless to say, Christopher Wren got stuck in, so as you come on past it, have a look at it. Every single inch of this building, Sir Christopher very firmly considered as best as he could, and he even imagined himself as a bird looking down upon it. If he had helicopters, he wouldn't leave this building alone. Now, when you get to the top of that dome, you're doing a route that more or less is the same as the old days. The only thing is now is that Sir Christopher's London is gone, and even the London of the 1920s, 40s, 60s, 80s. Every consecutive decade since the war, not because of it, has seen something spring up and come down and refurbish and everything else. You see the New Chain Shopping Centre, just up to your left, that opened in 2016. Ghastly modern building that if you climb to the top of it through the lift anyway, you get a nice balcony that lets you look at St. Paul's, and you can hold it in the palm of your hand, it feels like. So, do so. And that will take you onto Cannon Street. So you're now in the very heart of the capital. Indeed, Cannon Street was created by the Anglo-Saxons 1500 years ago as really a home for their candle makers, hence the Anglo-Saxon name Candlewick. And as you can see, there's no candle makers nearby, and Bread, Milk and Honey Streets respectively guard a kill ahead of us, don't do what they say on the tin. As you see, and as I say, very quiet at the moment on the streets of the City of London. There's a handful of people, but all the action now is up the West End. Come here at the busier periods in the week, in the morning up until about 9:30 when they all turn up for work, the lunchtime rush 12 to about 1:30, and then when they all start heading home, it's usually a steadily building trickle out towards London Bridge. So as you come past, you see that nook up to your left just past this lights when we head off for it. And Bow Lane is the width of a pre-Great Fire street. Now, during the day, lunchtime rush, you can't see the end of the lane for looking because it's full of people queuing out of all the coffee and sandwich places and whatnot. And then in the evening, you can't see the end of it because they're all queuing out of pubs. And that's what Londoners do and have done for 2,000 years. So that essentially takes you up now towards the Bank of England, and then we're going to get you chaps to the Tower of London. So that was it, chaps. I got a bit breathless. I apologise if it was too quick for you, but it's surprising to me anyway that even though I haven't done the tour now in a little over 3 and a bit weeks, what comes back, I guess once you're a tour guide, you can't quit it, even if you're no longer in work. So I hope it was vaguely enjoyable. As I say, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I mean, on the bus it takes you 2 hours. So in my head I was stopping at traffic lights from time to time. But when this is all over, try and go to the city if you can. It's my favourite part of London because it's where it all happened. And the weekend is the best time to go because you're not going to get in the way of all those city workers dicking about on their phones. And, people do it anyway, wherever. But city workers are city workers, aren't they? Do check out the old Bell. I have been in it myself with my brother. And it is a nice little pub. It's because it's small. If it fills up, it fills up, and people do sit and stand rather in front of pubs. I've seen it in all weather except for rain. I think heavy rain at that. So it's something to do. But bearing in mind what I didn't say on that commentary that I usually do on the bus is that pubs in the City of London usually are closed on a weekend. And those that are open in the square mile, not all of them close, tend to close sometimes at 5 o'clock. There's 1 or 2 that actually open later, like the one I went to for my birthday by St. Paul's Cathedral last year, and it was a Sunday, and they were still open when we left at 6, I think it was. So try and do it. And in St. Paul's now is a little bit more expensive than it was when I went in 2008, but it's something to do, and we'll see what happens for subsequent videos, and hopefully you chaps will like whatever I do. If you don't, you can let us know. I've had no dislikes on these videos yet. I'm the first time for everything. So try and take care, and I'm going to go and write on my blog now because I'm bored. Not because of you chaps, you don't bore me. Well, we'll leave it there, shall we?